that you abolished the diaper tax.
The thing is, if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. Every single one is different.
And you're the dean of the School of Communications at Quinnipiac University for
because it's allowed me to understand education.
I started traveling the country, just training people to understand these disabilities.
That was one of the reasons why I brought you on to discuss that.
Monday night, 8 p.m. EST.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Pamela Roth Live. And 3 years ago, and she unfortunately, we had to go through that with her during the time period of the lockdown from quarantine during COVID-19. And my mom eventually passed away from it. It's now about 2 years since she passed away, and she was diagnosed with dementia. And, you know, growing up, we never heard this expression dementia. You know, as far as, you know, you have your elderly grandparents and even your parents, if they walked into the room and they would forget something, or in the middle of a conversation, they would forget something, you just figured it's like, oh, you know, grandma and grandpa are getting old. And you just figure this is what happens to people when they get older. And I've come to learn that dementia is just kind of like a broad stroke terminology, and it encompasses a lot of things. And it doesn't necessarily happen to somebody who's old in their 70s and 80s and more. So I'm looking forward to you tonight, educating all of us, myself included.
Yeah. So dementia, dementia is really not a diagnosis. Dementia is really this collection of symptoms. And your mom's symptoms were probably different than my mom's symptoms just because they're different people. And we have to recognize that. Most people do have short-term memory loss. But, whether mom can no longer make that recipe that she always did because she can't sequence things anymore, or maybe she's forgetting her hygiene. Some of them do, but some of them don't. The frontotemporal people, that's not their problem. With a different diagnosis, maybe her problem is that her filter is out between her brain and her mouth. And these people tend to alienate people and be rude, but it's the disease talking, and we have to figure out how to come alongside. Some of them, it's safety awareness. I had a woman who she had on her mind turkeys are on sale for 29 cents a pound, and she needed to get out to the grocery store, and it didn't occur to her it was 2:30 in the morning, and it was dark out. And so they did find her outside on her way with her pocketbook, and she was going to go get that turkey. And in her mind, that's all she could think about. So we have to remember that dementia, we call it an umbrella term, and it is not the diagnosis. It's when we're seeing symptoms that we're going, okay, there's brain change going on. That was weird. But we tend to turn our back on those a lot of time, Pamela, as just, oh, that's just old age. Because honestly, you and I, we don't want our loved ones to be sick. My father definitely did not want my mom to have brain failure. And so they can become quite the enabler and not confront it with doctor's appointments and lots of testing. We're better about that now. But, Alzheimer's was diagnosed in the early 1900s. But we did not really address this. Honestly, a lot of these folks were given like a mental health type of diagnosis, maybe that they had some type of schizophrenia or something like that when they were acting out. Just in recent years, we're making a lot of headway and more testing. And now we know there are more than 120 diagnoses that can give us symptoms of dementia.
But I also noticed it doesn't happen with every single person who gets elderly. A lot of people who are elderly just die from, maybe heart failure or just from, like they say, old age. It's not something that is there a reason why not every senior citizen or every elder person does not come down with dementia or a form of Alzheimer's?
Sure. So statistically speaking, they say that your greatest risk isn't whether it was in your family, although that does put you and I at higher risk since it was in our family. The greatest risk is really our age at this point in time. That seems to be the consensus out there among people who study this disease, and that by age 65 in America, probably 25% of the population is experiencing some symptom. And by the time we're 85, 50% will have symptoms. But you know what? Let's bank on 50% that don't. You and I can just go to bed helping people, and maybe we'll be on that side that doesn't get this. But brain failure, it just results from a lot of different things. It can be related to a blood pressure, a circulation problem. It can be related to diabetes. It can be related to maybe they have something, a brain tumor or something that's giving them this. So I just want to say that once you're seeing symptoms, people usually get it checked out. Once there's about 5 symptoms that, Pam, they can't cover for anymore. And so then it's like, oh, we got to address this. They're doing this. Maybe they're repeating themselves, or maybe they keep getting lost in the car and they don't want to give up the car. Those are tough situations. And you also need to realize that some of these people see the disease and they're usually very sad and depressed, and honey, I'm losing it. I just don't anymore. And then you have some that are like, get out of my blankety blank house. I don't need you. Oh, okay. So that's a really tough person to work with, because you can go in there and tell them, Mom, you got brain failure. And they're like, I don't need you anymore either. And so that's really tough. And that's something that I can come in and help. But think of dementia as the umbrella, and underneath it, Alzheimer's still, we feel like some say 60% of the people with dementias, probably 60 to 80%, depends on what statistic you're looking at. But we have vascular, and those are the people that have blood pressure issues. Maybe it's a heart issue. But those folks, they can, like Alzheimer's is kind of this chronic debilitating decline, where people that have vascular, they kind of stair step, and they're at this level, and then boom, they have some type of brain accident, a TIA, transient ischemic attack, a mini stroke or something, or maybe it's a heart issue, and then they drop down, and then they're at this for a while. They stair step through this disease. We have the frontotemporal people, where the disease is located in the front part of their brains. And we have Lewy body, we have Parkinson. They call it Parkinsonian dementia. So people that get Parkinson's disease, so they have a physical problem before they have a mental problem, but 50% of those people go on to develop dementias. And so we have to kind of prepare those families too. So as you can see, dementia is the umbrella, and there's lots of different symptoms. It could be hallucination. My mom might have that, your mom might not. That's okay. We still need to investigate what it is. And the challenge is, Pamela, if we don't investigate it early on, some of these folks can get too frightened to go out, and they aren't going to go to the doctor, or they can't endure the testing. They can't endure the spinal tap or the PET scan or this CAT scan, MRI, things like that. And then we are stuck with, well, they've got some form of a dementia. But ultimately, Pam, what we have to do is comfort care and symptom management. We still have to figure out how to love these people through this journey and maintain a good relationship with them. And that's what I can train families on how to do.
Well, one of the things that I learned, first of all, my mom was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia.
Oh, okay, a tough one, because they have hallucinations, and I'm sad to say those usually go quicker than just some of the other ones.
Yeah, thank you. From the time that she was diagnosed, it was like a 2-year journey, and then she passed on. But I did, thank you. I did learn a lot, because I had joined a number of these dementia support groups through social media. So I was better able to understand things, because at first, I'll use my older brother as an example, because he was really the caregiver of my mom, and he spent a little more time with her because he lived with her. And so at first, of course, none of us want to accept the fact that, mom has dementia. And, one of the things that we noticed about her was the fact that she had a little bit of difficulty understanding that my brother was my brother being her son, because she started thinking that he was her husband, my dad, our father, who had been deceased for a long time. Mm-hmm. So she would speak to him and identify him as her deceased husband, mm-hmm. or she was seeing and speaking to, her sister and her parents who had been long gone. Mm-hmm. And she's trying to convince us they're in the room, and she sees them, we're talking to them.
Sure.
And my older brother was a little combative with that. And then at one point, with everything that I learned from these groups, is the fact that, you have to basically go into their world, because they're not in our reality right now. They're in theirs. So rather than arguing with with your loved one of trying to bring them back to our reality, join them on their journey and say, okay, so what are they saying to you, and how's she doing, or how's dad doing? And one of the other things that I learned too is the way it works in the brain is that if you take a string of Christmas tree lights, at some point the light dims and that bulb goes out. The rest of the string of lights still work, but you have a couple that are dim or going out. And that's what's happening in the brain, where you have different functions and brain cells that are dimming out and then going out, but they never come back again. And you just have to work with the other ones. And that's what we learned. And again, I mean, like I said, this is a journey that you're on with your loved one. And rather than fighting it, it's really learning how to deal with it to make their lives more comfortable. Yeah. And in a nutshell, your loved one is still in there. Like we learned, my mom was still there. That's still our mom. And we still loved her very much. But it was kind of like she was in a cocoon. And there were days that she was fine, because there were days that you would never even think that she had dementia. And then there were the other days where it was, hello, I know you're in there somewheres.
Yeah.
We did a lot of things, to bring her about. And one of the things that we did learn is the fact that if you play memory games with patients who have dementia, it does help them with their memory. But does that depend on what level they're at?
It does, and it depends whether it's annoying to them. So anything we do that creates annoyance, then it's not a good thing. And so we just have to be careful whether they're enjoying that and getting something out of it, some enjoyment, or if we're not. You brought up Lewy body. That's a really tough one. They do hallucinate a lot. And Lewy body can also be on and tracking with us in a very normal fashion, but then they can be off. And they're out there somewhere and they have these grandeur ideas. They think they can they think they're Superman or Superwoman, and they can do all these things they could do when they're younger. They definitely hallucinate more. And with the whole hallucination, what we teach is that as long as the hallucination isn't upsetting to them, because like I did walk in on a lady once, I was doing rounds at a memory care, and it was nighttime, and I heard talking in her room, and I knocked on the door, and I'm like, Mary, hey, it's Teresa. How are you? And she said, oh, meet my friends. And of course, no one was there. And I said, oh my goodness, you have company. Well, don't let me interrupt you. And she was so in a happy mood, and these people were visiting her. And I wasn't going to mess that up for all the world. Now, if the hallucination is frightening, what if they're saying, get these kids out of here? I cannot even think, get these kids out of here. Well, before it escalates to the point of her throwing things, it might be good for you to say, oh my gosh, Mama, I am so sorry. You kids, how many times have I told you not to bother your grandmother? You get out of here. Shoo, shoo, shoo. And we play along. And then the thing is, we have to learn to validate where they're upset, see what we can do to physically deactivate that or reduce the energy. And then we have to move them, Pamela, to a different place or to a different emotion. Otherwise, they stay right there just with that anxiety and that anger. And so it might be a good time to say, oh, Mom, hey, you know what? Trying to get this soup going. I am so far behind. You are the one who can peel those carrots and potatoes faster than anybody. If you could help me. And if we allow her to have purpose with something she's good at, we should never ask these people to do things that they're not good at or they still can't do. We need to position them to win. It makes them feel good. They sleep better. They have purpose, and they want to be able to help us do something. And so you just have to move them to a different place so they let go of that anger that was causing them anxiety before. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I had a couple of questions for you. Just okay, there are different levels or stages of dementia.
Yeah.
What are the different stages?
Well, it's interesting. One thing I want to say is that it doesn't really matter. We're still going to do comfort care and symptom management from that respect. So I don't lose a lot of sleep on what stage we are, but I try and get people to, when they come in the room, because like you said a minute ago, sometimes she would think your brother was her husband. Okay, so she's back in time. She's not looking for someone as old as she is. She's looking for someone younger, and he fits He fits the description right now. He probably sounded like your father. He probably looked a little like your father, right? And he was there with her one-on-one. So why wouldn't she think that? And we're taught to go with their flow. So if in that moment she thinks, if she wants to lay down with him, that's a whole different level. But usually it's not that. Usually it's very benign and it's very comforting for her to think she has her spouse there. And so what can we do to just comfort her and allow that to be and play that role in that moment when she's there? I remember walking in once, and so you just need to have your detective hat on every time you come in, Pamela, as to where are they right now, because it can be up or down. And I walked in and my mother said, "Are my parents here yet? Are my parents here?" Now, her parents had been gone probably 25 years, and we are done with reality training. We do not reorient these people to the present. The last thing I'm going to do in that moment is tell her her parents are dead. Because if she's not remembering it right now, it's like I just told you that your mother had passed. And the hurt is so much more extreme when we first get that news. Mm-hmm. And so we don't do that. We join them on the journey. And again, how do we validate her worry right then? Validate. It used to be we just wanted to redirect. Well, if they're upset about something, they don't want to redirect and look at the pictures and the puzzle or whatever. You have to first validate what they're upset about. And so I said, "Well, Mama, let me think. I'll check the driveway and see if they're here." And so I left the room. Well, that made her very happy because I actually did something physical. I didn't correct her. I didn't make her feel stupid. I just went with it. And I zipped out of the room. And honestly, Pamela, it gave me time to think about what I was going to say next, right? Because they hit you up with stuff and you're like, "Oh, what am I going to say right now?" And so then I came back in. I said, "Mama, there's no little green car. They had that little green car. I remember their car's not here, but I got someone out there watching for them." Now that wasn't true. I was the only one there. And it was my job to get her up from this nap where she was in bed. And she goes, "Oh, good. And that put a lot of whatever was her anxiety was about them being there, it let a lot of that go. And then that was my opportunity then to redirect. And I went, oh, Mama, I've got new pictures of the puppy." So something about pictures of puppies and kittens, that was a win for my mom to redirect her to her happy place. Your mother's happy places were probably different. It might have been the photo album. It might have been some event in your lives or some holiday. But whatever it was that brings them joy, we can keep reorienting them to that. But not until we validate what they're upset about, de-escalate that energy. If they're anxious about it, we got to do something to let them see that, "Oh, I understand what you're saying. That shouldn't happen." And emotionally, I need to get on their team. It's interesting that Mayo Clinic says, and this is something when I'm training caregivers, say in a big community, like in a retirement community, caregivers tend to be overwhelmed with too many patients and they got so much to do. And all I can think of, they got 10 people to get up, get washed up, get changed, and get them to breakfast in the first 2 hours of their shift, right? So I'm kind of like, and it's like, okay, time out. Because if the approach is wrong and if I rush you, oh my gosh, your dukes are going to come up and I have ruined that. And so Mayo Clinic says that our tone and our body language are more important with these individuals than our words. They can't usually grasp all the words. Language and cognition, typically left side brain for most people, tends to get damaged early on. So they aren't really understanding all the words, but they're watching you and they're listening. And they might hear you say, "Ba-da-da-da-da," and they hear the tone go up. They know you're asking a question. And these people tend to just start saying no to everything, even if it's chocolate cake, because they know that yes means you do something to me and no means you don't. And they remember how we make them feel. You probably remember that your mom was different with different children in the family. She would act differently. And if you have someone that lives out of state and they just call her, she can be quite cordial on the phone. And then you're saying to your brother, "What's the big deal? She seems fine." And that happens all the time. That then I need to get a family on a Zoom call, get everybody on the Zoom call and talk about why the relationship is different. Because the people closest to them, they have the hardest deal. They give more and they lose more because the filter's really out for them. When they care for this loved one, the filter's really out as to how this person treats them. And they can see the worst side, just like our spouses see the worst of us, honestly. But in dementia, the person who's doing most of the care sees they get beat up the worst. I know my poor father, it was almost verbal abuse, and my mother, but it was a broken brain, and she was very hard on him. So we had to make sure that we brought in help, got him out of there so that he could still have a life. Because statistically speaking, they say 70%, well, 65% of the primary caregivers will die first, because it's so hard. And if they don't have good techniques on how to properly bring help in and get themselves out of there and to get resources from the community, my goodness, they get to the point where they can't even leave the house because she's refusing. They can't bring help in because she's refusing. They don't know good technique on bringing help in. And they start just, ordering fast food, and their health goes, something happens. And so I'm all about training up people and give them resources so they can continue to care for this loved one. But like what happened with your mom, for some people, keeping them at home is an option, but for some, you get to the point where it's no longer an option. And we have to always know what our plan B is going to be, because we don't want to go to plan B urgently. We want to be able to sort out and go check out these places ahead of time if we can. Because if we're just surprised by an incident, and then we're all of a sudden going, oh crud, she's going to have to go here maybe, and that's just harder on the family to adjust to. And
A lot of people make the assumption that when you put your loved one in a home that is geared only to taking care of patients with dementia or with memory issues, that you're doing it just to ship them off because you don't want to take care of them. And to me, that's really incorrect. You want your loved one with caring individuals who know how to take care of your loved one, because they see the changes. And it's not necessarily always, well, just give them some medication or just leave them alone in the room. Because I know, for instance, you have to have them doing physical things with their fingers and with their mind. They're not just sitting in a room all day long, rocking themselves, like back in the days when you think of someone who has mental health issues. When you think of mental patients back in the day, and even from years ago, you don't really know. No one really knows what was wrong with them. It was always the umbrella of like, oh, they're a mental patient, and a lot of them may have had dementia.
Oh, yeah.
And they're just sitting in a room rocking themselves or speaking to themselves. And that's what a lot of times people think. It's like, oh, you have your loved one, you're putting them in a home. It's a terrible thing to do. Mm-hmm. But you need somebody who's going to take care of them, because they have their physical needs, toileting needs, showering needs, as well as the rehabilitative needs as well. There's speech therapy and physical therapy.
Yeah, and I wish I could tell you that every place out there has special training for all those things, but I would be lying to you. And that's another reason I'm so motivated to get better training out there. I was a seasoned registered nurse of at least 3 decades when my mom kicked me out of the blankety blank house. I thought I understood dementia, and I had so much more to learn. And I can just tell you, in the area where I live, I'm not sure that the training that goes on in memory care is a whole lot different than the training just out on the regular skilled care or assisted living floors. And so we're working on that. I'm not sure we have yet succeeded in getting the best training out there, but we're working on it. And because, like I said, there's a lot of different diagnoses. There's a lot of different reasons why they do what they do. I mean, just dealing with hallucinations, I still hear people say, oh, tell her they're dead. Tell her they're dead. Bring her up to reality. And I'm like, no.
He's right. My brother did that. I don't mean to interrupt you. My brother did that. When my mother kept turning around and referring to my brother, oh, Eddie, where are you going? You're not supposed to leave me alone. Eddie, Eddie, Eddie. And my brother just, at one point, he broke down crying because he was like, I'm not Eddie. Dad is dead. I am your son. And that was like the worst, because now my mother was going, and from what I heard, because then it happened in front of me as well, like, what did you tell me? What, when did he die? Why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I there? And I looked at him, I was like, you never should have said that. I go, because mom is not in the present time right now. Right. I said, now mommy thinks she missed the funeral, you know, and then,
but he was doing the best he could. He was doing the best he could at the time, and no one had trained him
No,
See, I can't beat up the student if the teacher hasn't taught. And
exactly.
that's why I've got to get this information out there that, and my sweet father, he wanted to logic with my mom. I think it was 2 years, Pamela, before I convinced him that she's not going to have the aha moment, because he would spend lots of words trying to get her to have that aha moment. And she would finally just get really mad at him. Right. And I'm like, Dad, you can take this and give her a, oh wow, I'm sorry that happened, Mama. And even if she was wrong, just accept and agree. Wow. But you got to have the right tone and body language. You got to really buy in. My caregivers, the young ones, will go, wow, sure, you can be right. Where the residents like, and they just make it worse. But I try and convince families, I have families who say, you got to be honest. I can't lie to her. I got to be honest. And I'm like, it's brain failure. Do you want to make her feel really bad and make her feel really bad for about 4 hours? Or could I say, I'm so sorry that happened? Or can I be whoever it is she wants me to be and just go with it? She would say to me, a few minutes after I was there, she might say, when Teresa's here, she does the dishes. And I said, that's nice. Mama, I think she likes doing dishes. And she said, huh, yeah, that's nice. And we just move on instead of correcting her.
Right. It's
Just-
role play.
It's role play, but it's joining them on the journey. So back to the original question, you asked me about the staging.
Right.
You asked me about the staging. And I just want you to know that we can take them to the doctor and get them staged. But depending on what time they did the staging, how much sleep they had the night before, had they moved their bowels today, did their breakfast agree with them, you know what I'm saying? Whether they had a headache at the time can determine a lot about what stage they're going to give you. And I'm just here to tell you that they're never the same at 9 a.m. as they are at 9 p.m. It's brain failure, and our brains get tired as the day goes on. You and I are not as kind at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. We either are morning people and we're sharper at one or the other, or we're nighttime people. And, we're better in the evening. That's just being people. It's human nature. So Teepa Snow has her own form of staging. And because when I looked at these different profiles of how we stage people, you've got early, mid, late. You've got the 1 through 8, where 1 is the worst and 8 is the best, or you got 1 through 7 where 7 is the best and 1 is the worst. And it's like so confusing. I think Teepa came up with something based on gems. So things that were beautiful. Because honestly, Pamela, do you want to be a 1 or a 6?
It all depends.
We don't know. It depends on what scale I'm using too. But none of it sounds great. Since when do we reduce people, your loved one, to a number? So I don't love that. Teepa came up with a system of gems. And so people like you and me that are clear-minded, we're considered sapphires. We're true blue, right? We can think clearly. We understand right from wrong. We can still discern. We can still have a filter between our brain and our mouth. So we might see something that's very odd or unkind, but it doesn't come flying out our mouth with, gee, you're stupid, or that looks too tight, or something like that. We can discern. And then we have the next stage, which is the emeralds. You know what? Or no, I'm sorry, the diamonds. The diamonds are next. And what a pretty gem, right? And the diamonds are beautiful and they're clear most of the time, but boy, they can cut you if you say the wrong thing, and they're structured. And honestly, it would take me 3 hours to teach a class on the gem. So I'm giving you the small version of what this is. So we have the diamonds. And then the next level of decline would be the emeralds. Mm-hmm. And so there are some people early in the disease where they are kind of sapphire in the morning and more diamond at night. And maybe it's more difficult to get them to understand you got to go to bed and you should put your pajamas on and things like that. So we got to have technique. And then you've got your emeralds, who they're on the go. They may not know where they're going, but they're on the go. And they're still look very good and very physically able, unless we start correcting or asking too many questions. And we challenge them to do things that they don't have capacity to understand how to do. It might be something like, so what do you want to eat today? Well, that might be too big of a question. It might be better, instead of giving them an open-ended question, it might be better to give them two choices, an either or. Were you thinking, I know you love pizza, but I was also thinking maybe a fish sandwich, And so maybe we give them an either or, which allows them to still succeed. And who feels like they're in control, Pamela? If I said to you, do you want to go to this restaurant or this one? And then you choose. Who feels like they're in control?
The patient.
Yeah, you would, because you made that choice. And by golly, I went along with it. And so we can use that in all different things. My sweet mama could no longer pick out what she wanted to wear. I couldn't say, what do you want to wear today? But if I said, oh, mama, blue dress, green dress, green dress, she could pick one. And I'd say, oh, my favorite. I love this dress on you. Your eyes look real pretty with this, and then she would feel like, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm still normal.
Right. I'm still in control of my choices.
And
I know I learned that with my mom, and I learned that same thing, that, when you ask an open-ended question, was it on any day you ask me, what do I want to eat? I'm going to look at you with, I don't know. And I don't think I have dementia just yet, or at least no one's told me. But I did learn that if you narrow everything down and you give them limited choices, that it's better than asking these open-ended questions.
Yeah.
Because, it'll confuse them. And like you said too, if they're limiting with their choice of words and their language abilities, it's almost like you're making them look and feel stupid if they can't respond to you. So I did learn that. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about is a terminology that I learned through my journey with my mom, was something called sundowning. Apparently sundowning is related. It's a symptom of dementia.
Well, sundowning is, and I studied sundowning because this is what I do for a living. Sundowning is really a tired brain. And so sundowning, when they're at a point where they're very tired, I love your, the symbolism of the Christmas lights, and that some bulbs are going out. I love that, because it's very much like that. Actually, in the brain, we're getting holes in the brain where now the information cannot, they might get it here, but they can't get it over here. And so then they can't say what they want to say. They can't do what they want to do. But I love that scenario. And so sundowning is when you got more light bulbs out just because we're tired, and the brain is tired, and it just doesn't function as well when it's tired.
And then they get mood swings.
They can just be more difficult. We just got to be we have to be even more patient. We just can't rush them. We learned to take an hour to put my mom to bed. An hour. Because if you rushed her, dukes came up, heels get dug in, and it just wasn't going to be a good event. And the goal isn't to fight with them. And I'm embarrassed to tell you that when I was a director of memory and assisted living, if the caregiver came in too fast, Pamela, you've got limited peripheral vision. Who knows where your glasses are, or when the last time you got a new pair of glasses? Who knows if your hearing is great or not? You're sitting there in your chair, and the caregiver runs in going, oh, Pamela, we got a lot to do. Come on. I'm behind. You know what? We got to get you in the bathroom, get you changed. Oh my gosh, look at those toenails. And now you're kind of like, because they startle you. Yes. And your brain is screaming, assault, assault, assault. For some reason, the limbic system in the brain stays very active. And these people can really get upset and try to defend themselves. Any of them can become aggressive if we push the buttons in the wrong way. And sadly, what I would see caregivers do, and I wish I could go back and retrain them, I would do it different. But what they would do is say, oh, this Pamela down here, she's going to be tough. We're down in 304. Yep. I'm going to need help down here. She's wet to her ankles. This is going to take a while. I'm going to need your help. How does that make you feel? And now I bring two people in, and we force you to do care. So in my world, what we just did, Pamela, is programmed you. The next time we come in, what are you going to do?
Exactly. I'm going
You're
to be very defensive.
Yes, you're going to be defensive even sooner. And we
Mhm.
program you. But my sad thing is, who's going to get medicated? Who caused it?
Me,
Yeah, we
the patient.
caused it, but who's going to get medicated?
The patient.
You are, with no defense. You're going to get medicated, and will whatever medication they think they deem is the best one, because there really aren't a lot of good ones out there. Is that going to make you think more clearly, or does that just make you sit in your chair and drool on yourself and, make you more compliant to care being done to you? You see, if I come in slower, if I take about 2 minutes to approach, and I come in, and this is Teepa Snow's technique, her positive physical approach. And if I come in and I stop 6 feet out, kind of my arm's length and your arm's length, if someone doesn't get in your personal space, you feel a little better about that. And I'm like, Pamela, hey, Teresa the nurse, so great to see you. And I show you, Teepa says, show them an empty hand, notify your face, you're happy to be there. The empty hand shows you I don't have any handcuffs, baseball bats, nothing that your paranoid or hallucinating brain might already be afraid of when I walk in, because maybe somebody programmed you to be defensive. And so I show you this, I notify my face, my tone and body language has to be great. And I just can put my hand out there like this. Now, if I offer you my hand like this, what do you almost automatically do?
Put your hand out.
That's right. You put your hand out.
Mhm.
Is that the thinking part of your brain, or was that just muscle memory? See, something tells you that's cordially what we do with each other. If I saw you in person, it'd be like, Pam Roth, hey, so great to see you in person. It would be so exciting to meet you. And so we automatically do that. So Teepa says it's almost like a trick to get physical permission to do physical touch with someone. So now you know I'm there. But see, she also says that because your brain is moving slower because it's broken, some of the light bulbs are out, there's some holes in there, we're not connecting all the dots. You might look at me for a few minutes trying to figure out, are you friend or foe? And I'm just like waiting. And I can wait up to a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And if it doesn't work, if you get upset, then I'm going to back out and say, oh, sorry, I upset you, didn't I? You know what? I knew I came in too quick. You were tired. You know what? Let me give you 10 more minutes, and I know exactly what you like in your coffee. I'm going to run and get that for you, and then I'll be back. And I'm going to try the approach again, a little bit slower. And maybe what I do is pull up a chair and I get lower too, because you're lower and I shouldn't be dominating you. Maybe that was offensive to you. But once you get them to give you your hand, wow, boy, we have succeeded. And then Teepa says that we have to follow that with a compliment. Typically, caregivers, we have an agenda and we know 14 things that we want to get done. And so we come in with da 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 da, and you're like, whoa, I don't think so. And I offend you. But if I can just give you a little information and give you a compliment right away, gosh, Pamela, I love those eyes of yours. They're so pretty. My gosh, they look pretty every day. And you smile, boy, we just started the day off right. Rather than me coming in too quick.
And frightening.
Yes. And startling, and then your limbic system screaming assault. And I usually tell people this scenario, if you were leaving a location at night, you go to get into your car and you're putting your seatbelt on, and all of a sudden the door flies open and hands are coming in. How are you going to respond?
I'm going to be very defensive, very scared, very defensive.
Yeah. Are you going to punch, kick, and maybe cuss a little bit? I mean, it just may get ugly because you're going to do everything in your power to defend yourself. Well, think about that in terms of this brain failure. And if my brain is moving slow, my light bulbs are not all connecting, and this person comes in too quick, and the limbic system in the brain is right there. That fight, flight, freeze is right there. Cortisol, and it gets crazy, and the amygdala really gets fired up to defend myself. I have blown it. And unless I know to apologize, try and de-escalate, go and back out, I can just ruin the relationship with this person, and they're never going to want to do anything for me. And sadly, people at home all the time who care for people all the time, they may not realize how important the relationship is, and that we can have our agenda, but it goes in the back pocket. And I'm going to come in and see how your day's going right now, because maybe you are uncomfortable. Maybe you've got indigestion from whatever you ate last night. Maybe you don't feel great. Maybe you haven't moved your bowels yet this week. That's a problem. I hate to talk about that stuff, but it's a problem,
It's a physical aspect.
Yeah. And so we have to take it all into account when I come in, because I'm not going to push you to do anything. Like, I thought I was getting my mom up that time, but she had a good worry going on about whether her parents were there or not. And I would have been an idiot to say, oh yeah, your parents are dead. Let's get on with getting you up. She would have kicked me out of the house again. And who wins? Nobody.
No, it's a stalemate at that point, and nothing's getting done.
Nothing's
getting something. You lose the trust that you built up.
Bingo.
With your loved one or with the patient.
Yep.
And that's a problem. It's
the relationship. And you can actually put a wedge in the relationship that is irreparable. I had a daughter one time. She was a fixer. We can't fix these people, Pamela, and I'm sure you realize that with your mom. You can't fix her. So we got to figure out how to still provide great care and love her, and put her in a place where she was getting great care, people who knew more about how to care for her physical needs too. But this gal was a fixer, and she would come in going, why can't you, golly, you got to do this. I left the food out. Why can't you do that? Why can't you change your clothes every day? And, and the mother was just kind of like, no. And she didn't want to see the daughter anymore. And the daughter's like, she's mean as a snake. We can't do anything with her. This is a true story. And so what they decided to do was, she had one brother. They decided to do good cop, bad cop. And so she was technically the bad cop. Like, she's the one who wanted to take the car away. She was the one laying down all the hard rules. I wish I could have talked to her ahead of all those things, and we could have done some better techniques to blame somebody else for why she couldn't drive anymore. Maybe we get the doctor to say it. Maybe we get the doctor to write something and we put it on the fridge and say, oh, Mom, golly, that doctor thinks you can't drive. What a bummer. That stinks. I guess that's going to happen to me someday. Whew. You know what, Mom? We'll make sure you get to go anywhere you want, because, it's important. And you got places to go and people to see. And, I would do it something like that, but they had already blown it. Daughter wasn't welcome anymore, but the son would come. He was the good cop. He would take Mom out for dinner and do all the nice things. And the daughter would come in and do all the laundry, clean the house, do what she could, stock the food. And the son would bring her back. And they're like, you need to come see her. She's mean as a snake. Because usually I work primarily with family and train them up. So I went to see this lady, and I knock on the door. She flings that door open. They had programmed her to be very defensive. She was like this all the time, I'm afraid, Pamela. She throws that door open. She goes, get out of mine. I won't cuss on your program. Get out of my blankety blank house. She goes, I'm a millionaire and I don't need you. Just like that. First time I ever met the lady. Okay, hair was really wild. She had several layers of clothes on. And what was interesting, Pamela? I noticed her shoes were like oversized men's tennies, and they were dirty and old. And I thought, okay, mental note, there's something going on there. I don't know what that is. And so I did the Teepa Snow. Hey, Teresa, the nurse. I said, can I come in? And she just looked at me, and I gave her the full 2 minutes to check me out, and she's looking, and finally she says, well, okay. And I thought, whew, because I have no idea. You have no idea. I'm just giving it a whirl and seeing. It depends on, how they've done it in the past and how she's been programmed. But she let me come in. Pamela, I visited with this lady, kind of did a nurse assessment. She had 10 ingrown toenails underneath those tennies. 10, not one. Not 10. One broken toe, 10 ingrown toenails. I don't think they had checked her toes, and they hadn't been able to get close enough to her to check her toes. And so I was like, holy cow, how much pain she was constantly.
Yeah, there had been a lot of pain that she had to wear oversized shoes.
Yeah. Oh. And here the family is thinking. And so that's why I like to tell people that if they're using the emergency words, which, with language cognition, left side brain gets damaged. And then we do have what I call the emergency words on the right side of our brain. And for some people, never use foul language, but for a lot of people, they develop their own classic go-tos. My mother had her favorites. And so when you're seeing the emergency words or words that don't make sense, they frequently are curse words. They can be racial slurs. They can be sexual innuendo. But when they with vigor are using poor language, people frequently label them as having behaviors. And I just say, time out. You say this behavior word all the time, and then you think that gives you the right to medicate. And I just want to say, time out. They are still communicating. That is maybe the only form of communication they have right now. And so how can I be a good detective and not a judge and throw a medication at them or assume it's just brain failure and this is how they're going to be, you're just going to be mean as a snake, but to actually maybe do an assessment and see if I could find pain, fear, anxiety. Because in my book, that's typically when we go to those emergency words or we act out pain, fear, anxiety. And for her, it was definitely pain. And once we got her feet fixed, now in the process, we did get her moved to memory care. She should not have been on her own in her house any longer. And the family couldn't afford to provide 24/7 in the house. So we did find a nice place for her to go that had real good, it was small. It was a place that they divided into neighborhoods, 4 neighborhoods. And so there were only like 12 residents on a wing. And so those 12 residents did life together with the same staff. And it was a good thing. Continuity of care is really important. They can get used to people and the people know their patients, which is really, really important. Know the residents. And I went to visit her there after they gotten her feet all fixed. And she was beautiful. She was content. She was sitting in the corner, legs crossed, like just an elegant woman. And her hair was done. She'd been to the beauty parlor and it was so much better. So I'm just saying, I don't want people just to automatically judge people with dementia that, oh, they're mean as a snake. You can't do anything with them. You got to give them medications. Because, I mean, these antipsychotics that we throw at these people, I've never seen them make anything better.
Right.
All it does is dumb us down or make me fall out of the bed and break my hip. And it's over soon after that because those people typically get pneumonias and then they die from pneumonia.
But something, what I learned over the time that my mom was in 2 hospitals for some injuries from falling, and then eventually in this specialized dementia center where they only cared for dementia patients, was in the 2 previous settings that she was in. The people who were there, the caregivers, did not understand or how to treat and care for a patient with dementia. There was no understanding. And we did have a situation where one of the attendants labeled my mom as difficult and combative. And they had to bring other people in there because what happened was that when we did go to visit my mom before COVID, we saw bruises on her hands and her wrists and everything else. And one of her fingers actually looked like it was bent all the way back and bruised. Oh. She had no recollection of how it happened.
No, but she doesn't know.
She had no idea. And they labeled my mother as being very difficult and a fighter. And then we had to take her out of there. And then we eventually put her in this facility where they only had a limited number of patients there.
Good.
And
you feel like they had better training. I hope they had better training.
Much better training.
Thank goodness.
Because before that, in the other settings that she was in, whenever we went to visit her, one of the things that was very heartbreaking was when she would say, "Why am I here? What did I do?
Oh.
Why are you punishing me? I just want to go home."
She thought it was punitive.
Right. And it was just so heartbreaking because I'm thinking, what are they saying or doing to her here that she feels that way? And my brothers and I felt so guilty because we're trying to tell her, "Mom, you're here to get better.
That's right.
It's not punishment, And she was like, "I just want to go home." And that's what she would always say. And then once she was in the dementia facility, she didn't say that anymore because they made her feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And we were told we had done a picture collage, which also helped her with her memory.
Good.
Because it had pictures of everyone in the family, the ones who were living, that would go and visit her. And this way there was a familiarity. If she would look at the pictures on the wall and when we went to visit her, it was very helpful. And then we played all her favorite songs.
Oh.
the most amazing thing is, we would play Frank Sinatra, and she knew all the words, and she'd be singing along.
Music is a wonderful tool. I love that.
So we learned a lot. And so, what I share with you is the fact that there needs to be better training
Yes.
of nurses and doctors and anyone in the medical field who are now dealing with patients who have different forms of dementia.
Yeah.
Because the senior citizen population is now the fastest growing population.
Yeah.
And they're living much longer than back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Absolutely.
And which means that our loved ones are going to be living a lot longer with various forms of dementia.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. And that's something we are working on. I've created videos. We've learned though that we can't do training just in a didactic manner, meaning that you just watch something, you watch 30-minute video or you read, an article. Unless you are exposed and develop some type of experiential training where you're going out and you are developing skills. And so we've just learned that we have to practice, because you don't know with dementia, didn't she surprise you with some stuff? She'd say something completely off the wall or get mad about something. You're like, well, how did that happen? Why did, and you just got to be able to respond appropriately and be part of the solution and not part of the problem with, because this doesn't work. Finger wagging them down, and trying to say, now you stop acting like that. I'm giving my time to be here today. That doesn't work. The punitive thing doesn't work,
Right.
So how can we get better training? So I'm working on it. I have a colleague in Virginia, Marion Kiner is so awesome. She's written curriculum for nursing schools. And she's been able to get into Longworth College and University of Virginia have given her places on their as a teacher and as a professor, and she's teaching nursing students in a way that they are learning skill sets. So many of the things that I've talked to you about, she's training them. And that's where it's got to start. It's got to start in medical school. It's got to start earlier. Like I do train first responders here because honestly, they need to know too how to respond, that these people have poor vision. They are only seeing like this. Don't surprise them. Don't startle them. They need to know all these skills too, but they have to practice them. And so Marion is getting ready to put out the curriculum so that other nursing schools can pick this up. These nurses have to be trained before they get out there, because otherwise, what she noticed with her students, and these were fourth-year students who'd been exposed to lots of patients, they're very much afraid of the dementia people. They're very much afraid when they react poorly. It's kind of like, what do I do? What do I say? And they've got to be exposed and they have to learn to practice. They need to know how to respond appropriately to someone who's experiencing brain failure, because it's going to surprise you and you've got to have some tools in your tool belt on what to do to keep the peace with these people. My mom, when we were finally figuring out why she was like this all the time, some of these people know they have it and some don't. Right?
But we also have to learn to keep them safe.
We have to keep them safe too. Yeah. But if you know that you have dementia, you're very happy for me to come in and help take care of you and sit with you. If you don't see it, there is actually a diagnosis called anosognosia. And, in my career as a nurse, we saw that with your bipolar folk. Do you know anybody with bipolar disorder? They get on their medicine, they start feeling better. And then what do they do sometimes? I don't know if you've had any experience, but they frequently quit taking their medicine because they feel great. They're healed. It's a miracle. They're healed. Well, what happens?
I think a lot of us do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we fake ourselves out, right? We're healed. But it's a true diagnosis with people with bipolar, and we see it with schizophrenia. And if they can't see the disease. They think they're fine. Get out of my life. You're wrong. I'm fine. And they can really cause themselves to have very difficult lives. But now we know that people with dementia, probably 50% develop anosognosia. So you can't come in and tell me I need help. My mom never would have accepted help. Get out of my blankety blank house. I don't need any help. Sitting in a wheelchair. She She just had no concept that she needed help going to the bathroom every day, multiple times. And if the caregiver came into her, Pamela, and said, here, Martha, let me help take you to the bathroom, she would put her hands on her hips and she'd say, excuse me, I do that myself. And, and she meant it. And don't think if you tried to push her wheelchair, she would be arms and legs out on the door frame. I'm telling you. So we had to learn a whole new technique on how to train people up. So the caregiver has to have their radar on when they come in with great assessment skills to look at you and think, okay, does she know where she is right now? Does she realize she's sick? And I'm not going to ask those questions straight up, but I'm going to introduce myself and we're going to figure out where you are in this moment. And do you even realize that you've got anything? Are you wanting me to be there to help? Or are you like, I don't need any help? We were able to get help into my mom's home just because my dad lived there and he was older. And we were able to say, oh, Mama, Dad's going to need some help. He's really older than you. She was like, he is older. He needs help. And she bought it hook, line, sinker. And so we were able to bring help in to help her, but otherwise forget it. And you had to come up with a reason for her to come help you. These people with anosognosia, it's really tough. You have to make them feel like they're the boss. They're in charge. They're making the choices. Definitely do either or with them. But I would have to let her think that I needed her help with something. And I'd say, Mama, hey, it's Teresa. And she'd say, I know. And I'd say, I was hoping you could help me. Aren't these shoes cute? Didn't matter what I was wearing. Aren't these boots cute? Whatever. And she'd say, yeah. That was a normal response. Normal chit chat, right side brain. She'll be kind. And I'd say, oh, but I got a new blister. I'm looking for Band-Aids and I think they're in your bathroom, but I can't find them. I was hoping you could help me. Now, 95% of the time, Pamela, if we ask these people with anosognosia to help us, they sit up a little taller like, you need help, because they think they're wiser than anybody in the room. They're paranoid, suspicious. It's all your fault, and they're always the victim. Mm-hmm. You can't change that. And so you have to make them think they are the boss, they are in charge, and they're the smartest person in the room. And are you willing to play that game with them, or are you going to medicate them down? We learned to play the game, let her think, we called her the boss, and let her think she was the queen bee in the house. And but we would always ask her to help us when we needed her to go do something. And so I'd say and occasionally if she was tired, sundowning, she would say, now when in the H are you going to grow up? And I needed to say, Mama, seriously, you're the best finder in all the world. You've always been the best finder. And she would sit up a little taller, Pamela, like, that's right. Good thing you figured that out. And then she would let me take her back to her bedroom. And on the way back, I just start telling her story about the grandkids and what they're up to, or the puppy dog. She loved talking about puppies and kittens. And then we get to where her bedside commode was, and I'd put her belt on and I'd say, okay, sister, 1, 2, 3. And we'd stand up, turn, pull the britches, sit her down, and keep telling the story. I didn't ask her questions. I told her happy stories that she forgot the next day. I can use those. I could use that excuse about the blister every day. I can use those stories every day. Find out what works with your loved one. Write it down so everybody else can know these things work. These things don't work. Don't talk about Dad. He's no longer here. Or maybe it was an ugly divorce. Don't go there. Don't talk about those. Don't talk about maybe you've lost a sibling. Don't talk about that. Don't talk about things that are going to upset her or bring sadness. Her brain is broken.
You notice, Teresa, because they're also losing their independence. And that's something that they're embarrassed about, and that's something that they're fighting. Because if they've always taken, regardless of whether they're married, divorced, or widow, our loved ones have always taken care of themselves. They've gone to the bathroom on their own, as long as they're healthy and well. They've gone to the bathroom on their own. They've brushed their own teeth, brushed their own hair, gotten dressed, showered. And now all of a sudden, when they're not doing it on their own because that part of their brain is broken. And if you're saying you have to get into the shower, you have to brush your teeth, and you're forcing them all to do these things, or you're telling them that they, of course, if they're soiling themselves, and if you start making them feel infantile or embarrassing them about it, like you said, dukes are up. Like there's nothing wrong with me, and that's something that, as caregivers that needs to be taught. And what I would suggest, and of course, with your help, because this is your field, is that as soon as a family starts to learn and find out that their loved one is starting to have or show symptoms of dementia, at that point, there should be some sort of counseling given to the family. Aside from having caretakers taking care of the family, we as family members and children and grandchildren, we need to learn how to deal with, mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, because this is all new to us. We don't want to accept the fact that, our loved one is starting to have diminished mental capabilities and diminished brain functions. It's hard for us as well. It's very emotional because I want my mom back, and I just feel this is the kind of disease that steals your loved one away from you a little bit every day. It's a slow death that you're watching them. And
Yeah,
it's
it can
hard.
really change the relationship too. But just remember they're in there, and we love them in a different way. I couldn't share all of my life experiences with my mom. It was too much. But I could share moments of joy with her. And I could say, oh, Mama, you used to braid my hair all the time when I was in 7th grade. I loved when you braided my hair. And she would just smile, and it would just be a happy moment that we could share. And so going back in time and sharing happy moments is always a good thing. Yeah, I wish there was better training. I know so many families who the doctor said, well, she's got Alzheimer's. You better get your ducks in a row. Make sure the paperwork's done. Get your POAs, and make sure the wills and beneficiaries are set up right. And it's like, what? This is a long disorder. This isn't a 3-month pancreatic cancer. You know what? They're not going to be gone in 3 months. You said yourself it was 2 years. That's still a long time. But some of them can be 5, 10, 15, 20. These vascular dementia folks, if you get their blood pressures under control, they can live 30 years. That's a lot of planning for. And then learning techniques on how to keep the peace with them. I love to be able to teach families. And honestly, when a family comes to me and says, what do we do? Do we keep her at home? Do we put her in a place? What do we do? I would say in a perfect scenario, if there's money, I would start looking for your plan B, know what it is, because if something happens to whoever the primary caregiver is, then she's going to need to go somewhere. We better have already investigated that. And maybe we already have a deposit down on a room somewhere so that you got a leg in and the paperwork's already started. But I would somehow bring caregivers in, even if you need to make up a story that the doctor says it has to be done, blame it on him, not you, or that Medicare now has a rule that you have to have care 3 days a week once you're past whatever age you need to gauge that story to fit, the age of 85 or something. And you be on her team within this frustrating, with the same, if she's frustrated, you be frustrated, but always be able to say, gosh, Mom, you know what, but this will work out. You know what, you can get them to do the dishes. Good. Something like that. You make it fun. But I would bring caregivers in, go through a couple of them, find some ones that fit with her personality, use them for a while. And then when she does go into a place in a perfect world, Pamela, I tell family members, take the caregivers with you. You can do that. You can take her caregivers in there and have them caring for her in this new place. And frequently, you know what? We move these people under the guise of, oh my gosh, they have found termites in the house. They have found black mold. Oh my gosh, Mom, we got to get out for 6 weeks. So we're going to look for an apartment for you, just something temporary. The thing is, it helps her not want to take every pair of shoes she has. She's not going to try and worry about every piece of furniture. This is temporary, Mama. So we need your bed. And there are companies out there that can come in, take pictures of her bedroom, of all the things on the walls, and then they'll come in the day of the move and they'll take everything down and recreate the scenario in her new place. How cool is that? Because then it feels a little more safe and homey. It's a little more familiar when she's there.
Right.
Yeah. And so when she says, well, I need to go home, it's like, oh, I know. You know what? So I talked to the construction guy, and he said that they were able to get rid of the termites and here and here and here, but over the garage, they found a new spot. So they're working on that now, Mama. So we're probably 10 to 14 days out. And, the concept of time is it's really tough for them. because the short term is usually damaged. And so, but you need to validate her position. Every time she brings up the worry of, I got to go home, you need to say, I know, I can't wait, because driving over here is kind of a pain in the neck, Mama, but I'll do it. But you know what? I talked to the contractors and they're saying they got the mold in this, but you know, that one spot back in the basement, you know, in the far corner that's always damp. They said that's the biggest problem, and they're probably going to have to do a little plumbing stuff in order to get that spot to dry out. But they're making good progress. I'm very excited, very excited. And I checked on the house. Everything's still perfect. And then you say, oh, I've been meaning to tell you. Did you know John and Nancy, they got a new puppy? Look at this puppy picture. Isn't this cute? And redirect her to a happy place. But be sure and validate when she is worried. You know, when she comes up with, when am I going to get the H out of here? It needs to be like, I know, we're trying to make this work, but I know it's hard, new places. But guess what? The contractor said they're making good progress, and just validate it for her. And you know what? Eventually, Pamela, she quits asking.
Well, you know, so it's validation, and it's also having patience.
Yes, ma'am. Nailed it. Yeah, you nailed it.
We have to have patience because, you know, these are our loved ones, and making them as comfortable as they are for however much longer that they have here with us.
Yeah. And it's good if all the family's on the same page. You occasionally, I mean, TIPA says 1 in 5 families stick together after going through this with a loved one, because you know what? There can be family members who are like, I'm not going to lie to her. No, I'm not going to participate in that at all. And, you know, they're not going to be on the team to help make it the best situation. So anyway, so much to learn. You know, I could go on and on. I love this topic. It's become my passion. I want things to be better for us and our kids, you know, and so better training, but we're getting it out there. We're starting a tidal wave of education out there, and it's going to be good.
And I want to thank you so much. And Teresa, you are welcome back anytime, because you know, this is a topic that, of course, is very personal to me from what I went through with my mom. And even though she was only, you know, what seemed like her being diagnosed was toward the end with the dementia, and then living through it for 2 years, you know, in reflecting back from what I've learned, we were actually living it with her for years before that without actually knowing what it was. We just figured, oh, mommy's getting forgetful. Mommy's getting older. And it may have been about 6 years prior with all these different signs that we didn't see.
I fully agree. Yeah, we brush those aside as just old age. Yeah.
Old age. But I want to thank you, and everybody who's been tuning in. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We've been speaking with Teresa Youngstrom, and she is the founder of A Better Approach to Memory Care. And so if you believe any of your loved ones are showing signs of dementia, please get them checked out a lot sooner. So this way you can learn how to understand this disease and to better care for and have patience with your loved one. So thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Pleasure's all mine.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This broadcast is produced by Griffo Productions.